Aisle 9. The silent battle between a kidnapper and a canine's instinct. At precisely 8:46 a.m., the security cameras inside Maple Way Market recorded nothing unusual. A woman in uniform grabbing a coffee, a child tugging a parent toward the candy, a worker restocking peanut butter. Yet, tucked between those mundane frames lived a battle no lens could see. Officer Lyra Monroe had popped in for granola bars, her partner Bravo padded at her side, tail swishing lazy arcs. They turned the corner towards cereal, Lyra already half deciding between honey oats or frosted flakes, when Bravo's body went rigid. It was like watching a tide reverse course. One moment, calm surf. Next, undertow pulling hard. He planted his feet, refused to budge, nose tasting a current of panic humans couldn't smell. Lyra followed his line of sight to row upon row of cartoon mascots. Nothing looked amiss. But Bravo's breath slowed to that low, deliberate pant he saved for narcotic stings and missing child searches. And suddenly Lyra felt it too. The uncanny hush before a storm, the weight of an unseen gaze. Somewhere beyond those colorful boxes, terror was holding its breath, and a little girl's hope was hanging by the thinnest, quietest thread. The sky above Crestfield was painted in tired shades of gray-blue, the kind that hovered somewhere between night and day, as if unsure whether to rise or fall back asleep. A cool breeze threaded through the early morning stillness, brushing against parked cars, old maple trees, and quiet storefronts with the gentleness of a sigh. Officer Lyra Monroe leaned back in the driver's seat of her cruiser, eyes half-lidded behind the soft hum of the engine. The night shift had passed like most others. A slow crawl of domestic calls, false alarms, and one heated dispute between two elderly neighbors over bird feeders. Nothing urgent, nothing tragic. And that, these days, was something to be grateful for. Her canine partner, Bravo, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a coat like dark molasses, lay curled in the back seat. His chest rose and fell with the measured rhythm of deep, peaceful sleep. Every now and then, his paws twitched, chasing something in a dream, perhaps. But otherwise, he was motionless. The morning sun hadn't yet found the energy to pierce the clouds, so the cruiser's interior was cool and still. Lyra reached over to sip what remained of her lukewarm coffee. She grimaced. It tasted like old cardboard and bitter regret. "We need real food, don't we?" she murmured. Bravo lifted one ear. She smiled. "I'll take that as agreement." With a stretch and a creak of tired limbs, she put the cruiser in gear and pulled out of the quiet street. A few blocks away, the sign for Maple Way Market blinked softly, the scene of anything more serious than a toddler tantrum in aisle 3. Lyra parked right up front. Habit, visibility. Always park facing the exit. She turned off the ignition, twisted in her seat, and looked at Bravo. "You coming?" He blinked up at her. Slow, deliberate, then let out a long yawn. His tail thumped once. "No uniform today, just breakfast." She grabbed her wallet, clipped her badge to her belt, even off duty, it was never too far, and stepped out. The cold kissed her skin through the fabric of her department-issued hoodie. Leaves danced across the asphalt like tiny rust-colored birds. The back door of the cruiser opened with a familiar hydraulic hiss, and Bravo hopped down beside her, his paws landing soft and sure. He stretched, back arched like a lion, then shook himself fully awake. Tail loose, ears relaxed, he walked at her side toward the store. 10 minutes, she said, in and out. The glass doors of Maple Way slid open with a low whoosh, spilling warm artificial light onto the sidewalk. Inside, the world was exactly as expected. Drowsy shoppers browsing slowly, a mother juggling a cart and two restless kids, the distant beep of a checkout scanner, the hum of refrigeration units. The smell of cinnamon bread drifted faintly from the bakery section. Bravo trotted beside her, tongue lolling slightly, looking for all the world like a regular dog out on a walk with his human. But that image shattered in an instant. Just 6 steps inside the store, Bravo froze. His body stiffened, ears pricked high. The relaxed panting stopped, tail locked, muscles coiled tight beneath his coat like springs. His nose lifted subtly, and he let out a low guttural sound, not quite a growl, but something older, deeper, primal. Lyra stopped mid-step. "What is it?" she asked softly, instinct tightening her own spine. Bravo's head turned slightly, scanning the space with eyes that had seen more than most would guess. He wasn't looking at anything. He was feeling it, sensing something beyond human reach. Lyra had worked with him long enough to know, when Bravo locked in like this, something was wrong. It wasn't just a smell, it wasn't a sound. It was presence. He took one step forward, cautious. His paw pads made no sound on the tile. Lyra shortened the leash unconsciously, her other hand drifting close to her belt. The grocery store carried on around them like nothing was happening. A man in a windbreaker whistled as he picked out apples. A teenager scanned barcodes behind the counter, staring blankly into space. No one was walking towards something she couldn't yet name. Her pulse picked up, not panic, not yet, but a quiet drumbeat of awareness. Her boots made soft thuds on the waxed floor, muted by the silence growing between her and the rest of the world. As they turned the corner into aisle 9, the scene looked as mundane as ever. Boxes of cereal stacked high, jars of peanut butter, 2 college kids comparing granola brands. One of them laughed at something on his phone. Nothing stood out. But Bravo stopped halfway down the aisle. His nose hovered inches from the floor, then slowly tilted up. He walked toward a shelf, second row, midsection, where the boxes had been slightly rearranged. Nothing obvious, just not quite right. And then, without sound, he sat, perfect posture, eyes forward, not moving, not barking, just watching. That's when Lyra heard it, a sound so faint, so fragile, it barely registered. A whimper. She leaned in, heart pounding. Behind the cereal boxes, barely visible, a hand, small, pale, trembling. Bravo didn't look away, and Lyra understood in that exact breathless moment. This was no longer breakfast. This was a rescue. The doors whispered open. It was the kind of sound no one ever noticed, the soft sigh of automatic glass panels sliding apart. But this morning, it landed sharp in Lyra's ears. She stepped inside Mapleway Market, one bootfall after another, casual, unreadable, until the air shifted. Not temperature, not scent. Something else, something off. Beside her, Bravo's gait changed. Gone was the lazy, tail-wagging lope of a dog coming off a long shift. His paws met the tile floor with a precision she could feel through the leash. Not pulled, not yanked, just solid, intentional. His chest lifted higher, his nostrils flared. The fur along his spine bristled, rising inch by inch in a ripple of instinct. And then came the sound. A low, throaty growl, not loud, not even aggressive, just enough to make her heart stall for a half-second. Lyra stopped mid-step. Bravo never growled unless it meant something. In all their years together, Through late-night meth lab busts and back-alley weapons calls, he'd only ever made that sound when he was sure, bone-deep, cell-level, genetically coded sure, that something was wrong. "Bravo," she said under her breath, barely audible above the store's tinny speaker system, playing an old pop song about summer love. He didn't look at her. His head tilted slightly, like he was catching a signal buried under the static. His ears pivoted forward. His body stayed frozen, every muscle taut like a drawn bowstring. He didn't bark, didn't move, just section and bins of discounted candy. A little girl in a princess hoodie skipped past, with a tired father in tow. An older couple debated cereal brands 2 aisles down. The cashier waved to a regular customer at the self-checkout. No one else noticed the change. But Bravo had. She glanced down. His tail wasn't wagging. His stance had dropped slightly, body coiled closer to the floor. His jaw was closed tight, his breathing slower, focused. This wasn't curiosity, this was warning. "Easy," she murmured, a reflex more for herself than him. Bravo didn't respond, didn't need to. She felt it through the leash, the way it vibrated faintly from the tension running up his shoulder to his neck, like a violin string held too tight. Every ounce of his attention was trained forward. Lyra shifted her stance. Her right hand hovered a few inches closer to her duty belt. Not on the weapon yet, but closer. She wasn't in uniform this morning, off duty, just stopping in. But the badge was clipped to her waistband, and the instincts, those never came off. Her eyes scanned the immediate surroundings. Nothing. A grandmother comparing jars of pasta sauce. A teenage boy fumbling with a shopping basket and earbuds. A man in a gray hoodie examining a sales sign by the bakery. Nothing. Except Bravo was locked in. She crouched slightly, bringing herself closer to his level. His nose twitched, once, twice. Then his front paw inched forward. He moved slowly, deliberately, as though not wanting to disturb whatever had stirred the air enough to wake something primal inside him. Lyra exhaled slowly. "All right," she whispered. "Where to?" Bravo's response wasn't loud, but it was immediate. He took 3 steps forward, then stopped, looked back, made sure she was following. She was. They advanced past the bakery. The scent of yeast and sugar clung to the air, mixing with the sterile chill of produce coolers. Everything looked normal. The overhead lights hummed. The cartwheels squeaked. A baby cried faintly in the distance, then quieted. Somewhere in the far aisles, a bottle clinked against glass. But Bravo wasn't buying it. He kept his nose just a few inches off the ground, then lifted it again. Not a search pattern. This wasn't training mode. This was something older, something instinctive. His movements were different, tighter, like he was hunting without knowing the shape of what he hunted. Lyra felt her mouth go dry. A man in a red vest passed by, pushing a pallet of soda cans. He gave her a polite nod and a glance at Bravo. "Beautiful dog," he said casually. Lyra nodded, returned the smile. But she noticed gone bad in the stockroom. Bravo once reacted this way to a leaking propane canister behind a fast food joint. But her heart told her something else. And Bravo? Bravo was now pulling, not wildly, not with force, but with urgency, like someone who had just remembered what they'd forgotten, and now needed to get there fast. She let the leash extend, keeping step. They passed aisle 5, then aisle 6, then they hit aisle 9, and Bravo stopped, cold. No sound, no bark, no growl now, just stillness, like a held breath. His ears twitched forward, his chest rose and fell, nose pointed at the middle of the aisle. Lyra scanned the scene. Shoppers, shelves, boxes, everything looked normal. But it wasn't. Not to Bravo, and not to Lyra anymore either. Something invisible had folded itself into the air, and only one of them had caught its scent. She knelt beside him, hand resting lightly on his back. His heart thudded under her palm, not fast, but hard, ready. And then, in that silence, a faint, nearly inaudible sound. Not a voice, a whimper. The world kept turning around them. To Lyra Monroe's left, a young couple debated cereal flavors. She was holding up Honey Crunch. He made a face and counted with Cinnamon Oats. A cart rolled past with a squeaky wheel. Someone down the aisle laughed faintly. The store was alive in the way places often are in the early hours, soft, unbothered, unaware. But Bravo didn't care for the rhythm of normal. He stood motionless in the center of aisle 9, a living contradiction to everything ordinary. He wasn't barking, wasn't growling anymore, just still. His chest rose and fell with focus. His ears were forward, sharp. His nose twitched again, pulling in information Lyra could never access. The smell of adrenaline, sweat, plastic fibers, fear. She didn't need to ask him if something was wrong. She already knew the answer. Lyra stepped forward slowly, letting out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her boots barely made a sound on the waxed tile. She moved past Bravo, eyes scanning every shelf. Cereal boxes, granola, peanut butter. Everything looked fine. That's what made it worse, because Bravo knew better. She dropped her voice just above a whisper. "What is it, boy?" Bravo didn't glance at her. Instead, he moved, slow, almost reverent. His nose brushed the edge of the shelf about halfway down the aisle. Not the floor, not the bottom row, eye level. His body turned slightly, just enough for Lyra to see the shift in his posture, a barely restrained tension, like he was waiting for something to move. And then came the sound, soft, barely there. There. Not dramatically, just enough to make it look full when it wasn't. Like something, or someone, was meant to stay hidden but not buried. Bravo whimpered once. A sound unlike the growl from earlier. This wasn't warning. It was something softer, sadder, almost like grief. Lyra crouched. Her heart was pounding now, steady and deliberate, like a drum inside her chest. Her hand hovered over the row of boxes, fingers brushing faded cardboard. She gently pulled one away, just a few inches. And then she saw it. A hand, tiny, pale, trembling. She froze. For a breath, for two, long enough to steady herself, to let instinct take over. "Hey," she said softly, voice barely more than air. "Hey there, sweetheart." The hand didn't retreat, didn't flinch. Encouraged, Lyra leaned down further, just enough to see past the boxes and into the narrow, shadowed space behind the shelf. A hollow cavity between storage units and the rear wall, dark and narrow, and inside it, curled into herself like a thread pulled too tight, was a little girl, no older than 6. She wore a navy blue dress with tiny yellow stars. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped around a pink backpack so tightly it looked like an extension of her body. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes wide and rimmed red. She wasn't crying, not loudly, but her body was shaking. Lyra didn't reach out, not yet. "It's okay," she whispered again. "My name is Lyra. I'm with the police. You're safe now, I promise." There was silence. Then, in a voice so small it seemed to ride the air more than speak through it, the girl said, Don't let him know you found me." Lyra's throat closed. That wasn't a sentence a child came up with on her own. That was something memorized, something repeated under duress, something rehearsed in the dark. Her heart broke and hardened at once. She gently reached to the side, unclipping the small folding multi-tool from her key loop, and slid it along the edge of the shelving, prying just enough of a gap between the metal and boxes to let in more light and air. The girl didn't move, didn't blink, but she didn't resist either. Bravo sat down beside her, tail still, eyes locked on the child like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. His breathing had steadied, his posture calm now, no longer on edge. As if his work had shifted from sentinel to shield. Lyra slowly reached out a hand, palm up. "Can you move, honey? Is anything hurting?" There was a pause. Then, "My ankle," the girl whispered, gently, and raised a finger to her lips. The woman nodded and backed away silently. Bravo didn't look away from the shelf. And Lyra? She turned her shoulder, slowly bringing the radio mic to her mouth. "Unit 432, she breathed. "Request immediate backup at Mapleway Market. Possible hostage situation. Child present. Unknown number of suspects. Advise tactical unit. No sirens, no lights. Quiet approach." The mic clicked. Bravo shifted again, not out of tension, but readiness. Whatever danger was still lurking in this store, it had not left. Lyra turned her gaze back to the girl behind the boxes. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "You're safe now. I've got you." And Bravo? He was already facing the other direction, watching, waiting, listening for something only he could hear. The store was no longer just a store. It was quiet now, not empty, but suspended, somewhere between sound and silence, between safety and the edge of something darker. Customers moved in the distance, unaware, their voices muffled like echoes underwater. A soft beep at a register sounded far away, irrelevant. In aisle 9, time had narrowed itself to a single breath, and inside that breath, a child was hiding. Lyra Monroe knelt low, shoulder pressed gently against the shelf. She could hear her own pulse in her ears, but her voice, when she spoke, was the gentlest it had ever been. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said again, barely above a whisper. "You're safe now. I'm here with you. My name's Lyra, and that big dog beside me, his name is Bravo. He's a good boy. He found you." There was no answer, just the soft shudder of breath from the narrow gap between the cereal boxes. Bravo lay beside her, silent as a shadow. He had positioned himself between Lyra and the rest of the aisle, head low, eyes forward, unmoving. He wasn't just a dog right now. He was a wall, a protector, a signal to the child that whatever threat had followed her into this place, it would get no closer. Lyra reached out, slow and measured, and gently shifted one more box. The light hit the girl's face fully for the first time. She couldn't have been older than 6, hair matted and clinging to her cheeks, eyes wide, bloodshot, rimmed with salt. The pink of her backpack was faded, the zipper frayed. Her fingers clutched it so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her knee was scraped. A purplish bruise showed just beneath the hem of her dress, but she wasn't crying. "Me." That was all. 7 words. But they cut deeper than a scream ever could. Lyra's throat tightened. This wasn't a child who had wandered off. This wasn't a case of distraction or miscommunication. This was something else, something calculated, something terrifying. Someone had brought this little girl here, had hidden her, had meant for her to disappear in plain sight, and she knew it. That's what broke Lyra the most, the way the girl knew. Lyra glanced down at the child's legs. Her ankle was bound with a thick plastic zip tie, looped and secured to a metal crossbar at the base of the shelving unit. Quick, quiet, efficient. The kind of restraint someone practiced in concealment would use. "You're doing amazing," Lyra whispered, slowly reaching for her belt where her multi-tool still sat. She spoke each word calmly, steadily as her hands moved. "I'm going to get that tie off, okay? But we'll go slow. We won't make noise." The girl didn't speak again, but she didn't shrink away either. That was permission. Carefully, Lyra slid the tool between the plastic loop and the child's skin. The tie had dug deep, cutting into the soft flesh around her ankle. It wasn't bleeding, but it would bruise. She worked gently, slicing just enough to relieve pressure, but not fully severing it yet. She needed to wait. Bravo lifted his head suddenly, not all the way, just a few inches, but it was enough. He was listening again, scanning. The moment he moved, Lyra froze too. Her breath stilled. Someone was close. She leaned just slightly toward the girl and whispered, "He's here, isn't he?" The girl's eyes widened, but she didn't nod. She didn't have to. Lyra tapped her radio mic twice, short clicks, no voice. A signal to the incoming team. She didn't want sirens, didn't want the man to run. She wanted him quiet, still unaware that the plan had failed, that the ghost he tried to bury between the cereal shelves had already been found. Lyra placed a hand lightly on Bravo's flank. He was still listening, waiting. He hadn't made a sound since they'd stopped, but his body had shifted subtly, paws angling slightly outward, tail hovering, breath steady. Something was coming. From her earpiece, a voice crackled quietly. "Monroe, we're 2 minutes out. Tactical at rear entrance, holding position for signal." Lyra tapped the mic once. She kept her voice low. "No visual on suspect yet. Child secured but not extracted. Situation active. Proceed silent." Then she turned back to the girl, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, not touching skin, just enough to create the smallest gesture of presence. A kindness. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "I promise." The motion. His muscles tensed. His breath pulled in and didn't leave. His gaze fixed on the end of the aisle. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper, steady and firm. "You stay with her, Bravo." The dog didn't look at her, but his body moved to shield the child more completely. And Lyra? Lyra turned her head just enough to see the edge of a figure slip past the shelves. A flash of red fabric. Movement too practiced to be coincidence. A presence too calm to be safe. Her instincts roared to life. But she didn't move yet. She kept herself between the girl and the aisle, body low, eyes narrowed. This wasn't over. But the silence had broken, and someone was about to learn what happened when a little girl refused to be erased. Because she hadn't screamed, she hadn't cried, but Bravo heard her anyway. Bravo vanished like smoke. One moment, his body stood firm beside the child, still and resolute. The next, he was gone. A flicker of movement too swift to follow, low to the ground and utterly silent. Lyra didn't even have time to call after him. She felt the absence instantly. Her hand dropped from her radio as her breath caught. But it wasn't fear, not yet. It was instinct. The kind trained into your bones when you worked with dogs like Bravo. When they disappeared, it meant they had a scent, a target. Something had crossed an invisible threshold. He was hunting, and Lyra stayed. Because she had to. Because the little girl with the trembling voice and bruised ankle was still curled behind the cereal boxes, still holding her breath like the world might shatter if she let it out. Her fingers dug into the backpack again. Her body stiffened at Bravo's departure. "Hey," Lyra said softly, crouching beside her once more. "It's okay. He didn't leave you." The girl didn't speak, but her eyes, wide and dark like storm water, flicked up for the briefest moment, searching. The absence of Bravo felt physical, like the warmth of a blanket suddenly torn away. Lyra placed a hand lightly on the edge of the shelf, just to steady herself. "He's just doing his job," she said gently. "That's what Bravo does. He finds the people who hide." The girl's lower lip trembled. "Will he be okay?" Lyra nodded. "He's the best partner I've ever had. He's smart, he's fast, and he's brave, just like you." The girl's eyes dropped again. From her radio, a voice cut through the static. "Tactical team in position. Rear stockroom secured. Security." It buffered for a second before a grainy black and white footage began rolling across her screen. 6 cameras, all static, all impersonal. Until one flickered, camera 3, receiving. The grainy footage showed the back hallway leading to employee lockers and storage. A man walked past the lens, calm, too calm, glancing over his shoulder once before slipping through a door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." There he was. Red polo, jeans, baseball cap. He carried nothing, didn't rush, didn't hesitate, as if he'd done it a dozen times before, and maybe he had. Lyra's stomach twisted. She froze the frame and zoomed. No badge, no name tag, just a red shirt and the face of a man who could blend into any store, any day, any aisle. The kind you'd walk past without a second thought. That was the danger. He was forgettable, on purpose. Lyra sent the image to dispatch and tagged it for real-time tracking. Meanwhile, Maylee, the girl, was starting to unravel. Small sobs broke from her chest like tiny hiccups of grief and terror. She tried to hide them behind her backpack, but they came anyway. Quiet, broken sounds that spoke of long hours in silence and fear. Lyra shifted beside her, keeping her body low, her voice lower. "You don't have to be quiet anymore, Maylee." The name had slipped out. She wasn't even sure how she'd known it, but it felt right. Maybe the girl had said it earlier, or maybe it had been written inside the backpack. Or maybe, just maybe, some things didn't need explanation. The girl didn't react. But the sobs slowed, slightly. Lyra glanced at the end of the aisle. Still empty, still too quiet. Where was Bravo? The store hadn't locked down yet, too risky to alert the suspect. Tactical protocol was silent infiltration, eyes before presence. But every second ticked louder now. From her phone, a new feed loaded, rear storage hallway. And there, just beyond the stacked pallets and rolling carts, movement, a blur at ground level. Bravo. He wasn't lunging, not yet. He was tracking, low to the ground, his body coiled like a spring. He slipped through shadows, out of view, then back again, ghost-like. Then the red polo entered frame from the opposite side, unaware. Lyra's voice dropped into her mic. K9 has visual. Target in proximity. Do not engage. Let the dog lead. Dispatch acknowledged. Lyra looked back to Maylee. The girl's breathing had steadied. She was still clutching the backpack, but her shoulders had eased, just a little. Her gaze flicked between Lyra's face and the soft loading dock. Minor injury seemed secured. The girl flinched. Lyra smiled. That was him. That was Bravo. The girl blinked. Slow. He got him? Lyra nodded. He got him. The girl didn't cry, but her grip tightened, and for the first time Lyra saw something flicker in her expression. Not fear, relief. Just a crack of it. Just a breath. But it was there. Outside, red and blue lights finally came to life, silent. No sirens, but the world would know soon enough. The hunt was over. The shadow had a name, and the little girl who hid behind cereal boxes had been found, because a dog named Bravo never stopped listening. It happened all at once, a crash, the kind of sound that doesn't come from groceries tipping or a cart knocking over a display, but from something heavier, metal against metal, something colliding that wasn't supposed to. Then a bark, fierce, sharp, carved from the gut. Not the bark of greeting or warning, but the kind that only came from purpose. That low, chest-deep sound that told the world, I found you. Then silence. A silence so sudden, it pressed down on the building like weight. Every shopper, every employee who'd heard it from a distance, they froze. A manager near the bakery looked up. A teenager stocking canned soup slowly lowered his earbuds. A child in a cart stopped mid-whimper. Something had shifted. But for Lyra Monroe, crouched beside a child still curled in the cavity behind aisle 9, it wasn't sound that reached her first. It was knowing, a current that ran from her palm, up the leash that was no longer attached, and straight into instinct. Bravo had made contact. She pressed the mic on her shoulder. Confirm status on suspect. A voice replied, slightly out of breath, tinged with disbelief. Subject detained. Bravo has engaged. Officer down at loading dock. Minor wrist fracture. Suspect subdued with assistance of K9. Repeat. Suspect in custody. Lyra closed her eyes for just a second. Then she looked at the girl, Maylee, who hadn't moved much but had turned slightly toward the sound. Her tiny shoulders trembled. He got him, Lyra said softly. Bravo got him. You're safe now. Maylee blinked up at her like she didn't quite understand what that meant, like the words still had to pass through layers of fear and memory. But her grip on her backpack loosened just a bit. That was enough. Lyra touched her mic again. Request paramedics for the child. Minor bruising, potential dehydration. She's secure. She didn't leave Maylee's side, not even when 2 officers appeared at the far end of the aisle, their presence careful, measured. One of them, Rodriguez, a soft-spoken patrolman with quiet eyes, knelt beside Lyra and helped her gently cut the rest of the plastic tie from around the girl's ankle. Maylee winced but didn't cry, not once. Not to nothing. Just skin, bone, and silent trust. Her arms wrapped loosely around Lyra's neck, and her cheek pressed into the shoulder of Lyra's uniform. Her body still trembled, but there was no resistance, no struggle. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Lyra held her close, walking slowly past the rows of shoppers, now standing in quiet clusters, watching. No one said a word. There were no cheers, no applause, just stillness. The kind that follows after a near disaster you didn't see coming. The kind that fills a room after something holy has passed through it. Outside, paramedics waited with gentle hands and open doors. A blanket, a bottle of water, a gurney that Maylee refused, instead staying tucked against Lyra until the last possible moment. Only when she was safely in the care of the medics did Lyra turn back toward the building. Her chest burned, her limbs felt heavy, but she walked. Through the bakery, past the empty aisle, through the stockroom where Bravo had disappeared, and out the loading dock. That's where she saw him. Owen Tressler, mid-30s, red polo shirt now streaked with dirt and torn at the shoulder. His left eye was swelling shut, blood running from a cut on his temple. He was handcuffed, sitting against the concrete wall, flanked by two officers who didn't look particularly interested in kindness. His expression was unreadable, flat, like a man more annoyed than afraid. Lyra didn't speak to him, didn't even look at him long, because Bravo was there. Lying a few feet away, his chest rising and falling, his tongue lolled slightly from his mouth, sides heaving with a kind of exhaustion that came not just from exertion, but from control. His coat was damp with sweat, his eyes glassy. He had done exactly what he was trained to do, and more. She crouched beside him. "Good boy," she whispered, brushing her hand behind his ears. Bravo didn't lift his head, but his tail tapped once against the floor. They'd found more in the man's van, parked 2 blocks away behind an old diner. Zip ties, a roll of duct tape, a bottle labeled chloroform, disposable gloves, a folder with photos, not just of Mei Li, but of other children, different ages, different schools, targets. Some of the kids in the photos had gone missing already. Some hadn't. Not yet. Lyra didn't want to know the numbers. She didn't ask. She just stood and looked at the man in the red polo again, who now refused to meet her gaze. Bravo shifted slightly and let out a low exhale, the kind that sounded almost like a sigh. One of the tactical officers turned to Lyra. "Dog got him good, drove him straight into the steel shelf. He'll need stitches." Lyra nodded but didn't respond. It wasn't about stitches. It was about the fact that the man was going to, because a dog had heard what no one else did, had refused to walk past aisle 9, had stepped into the quiet, and pulled someone back out. The ambulance lights strobed softly across the storefront windows, red and white pulses flashing over glass and silence. They didn't use sirens, not for this. It wasn't that kind of scene, not anymore. The danger had passed. But the damage was still sitting quietly in Lyra's arms. Mei Li hadn't made a sound since they lifted her from behind the shelf. No cries, no questions, just that hollow kind of quiet that didn't come from shock, but from having learned how to be invisible. She was still clutching the faded pink backpack with both arms, the zipper frayed, one strap broken. Her knees were pulled close to her chest even now, as if her body couldn't unlearn the position it had folded itself into for so long. And her eyes, wide, too wide for someone so small, weren't fixed on the EMTs, or Lyra, or the blanket being offered to her. They were on Bravo. He was lying near the ambulance's rear bumper, his side pressed against the cool concrete, his tongue lolling slightly from exhaustion. He hadn't moved since Lyra brought her out. He didn't need to. He just waited. The way only dogs can wait, without expectation, without rush, without needing to be told what to do. An EMT in navy scrubs and rubber gloves approached with practiced care. "She needs fluids and warmth. We should get her inside the rig." Lyra nodded, brushing a wind-tangled strand of hair from Mei Li's cheek. "She won't go without him." The medic paused, glancing toward Bravo. Lyra didn't flinch. He rides with her, or she doesn't ride at all. They exchanged a look, not resistance, just a quiet understanding, the kind that forms in the space between protocol and compassion. "All right," the medic said softly. "We'll make it work." But Mei Li still hadn't moved. Her grip on Lyra's jacket had loosened only enough for her to slide to the ground. And even then she kept her eyes on Bravo, as if he might vanish if she blinked. Her small legs wobbled slightly as she stood on her own, but she didn't complain. She didn't speak. She just walked, straight to him. Bravo lifted his head as she approached. No bark, no tail thump, just recognition. His body shifted just enough to let her fit beside him. and she knelt, not beside him, not in front of him, but against him. Her arms circled his neck, her head rested beneath his jaw, and there, in the stillness of a parking lot that smelled like oil and heat and dust, Maylie finally exhaled. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. A long, shivering breath, the kind that comes when something breaks open inside you, and you realize you don't have to hold it all alone. Didn't have a name for. It wasn't sadness exactly, and it wasn't pride. It was older than that, quieter. The recognition of something sacred unfolding, something she wasn't the author of, only the witness to. She hasn't said anything, the medic murmured beside her. Lyra nodded. She doesn't need to. He hears her just fine. They watched a moment longer as Maylie buried her face into Bravo's fur. She didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She didn't ask for her mother, or for help, or for water. She just held on, as if he were the only thing in the world that had made her feel real again. And maybe he was. Lyra approached carefully, kneeling beside them. Hey, Maylie. Her voice was soft, like speaking into a church. The girl didn't lift her head, but Lyra could feel her listening. We need to take you to the hospital now, just to make sure you're okay. They'll take care of you there, but we can't go without Bravo, right? At the sound of his name, Maylie's fingers curled tighter into his fur. Lyra placed a gentle hand on Bravo's collar. He'll come, I promise. I'll ride behind you in the cruiser. He'll be with you the whole time, but we need to move now, okay? A beat, then, slowly, like a flower uncurling, Maylie nodded. Bravo stood first. His limbs were stiff, but he moved with purpose, positioning himself directly beside the open ambulance door. Maylie climbed in after him, not guided, not pulled, just following. Inside, she sat cross-legged on the bench seat, and Bravo curled up on the floor beside her, his head resting near her knee. The doors closed. Lyra stood back as the rig pulled slowly away. No sirens, just the quiet hum of wheels against pavement. She didn't realize until the vehicle had disappeared around the corner that her hand was clenched into a fist. She opened it slowly, letting the tension bleed out of her fingers. And for the first time since this all began, she let herself feel it. Not relief, but something deeper. The beginning of connection. Because that little girl had spoken 7 words, and none of them were for Lyra. They were for the dog, the one who found her when the world had passed her by, the one who heard her even when she hadn't made a sound. The room smelled like fluorescent light and old coffee. It wasn't the interrogation room you see on television. No harsh, swinging bulbs, no mirrored walls. Just neutral gray, a cheap metal table, 2 chairs, and a silence that pressed down on everything like humidity. Owen Tressler sat with his hands cuffed in front of him, fingers twitching slightly in his lap. His red polo was stained from the scuffle, a tear at the shoulder where Bravo's teeth had found him. His left eye was swollen. A butterfly bandage clung to his temple. Girl zip-tied behind a cereal display. As if Bravo hadn't brought him down before he could vanish again. He hadn't said a word since they brought him in. Not to the officer who read him his rights, not to the detective who offered water, not to the public defender sitting next to him now, thumbing through a yellow notepad with practiced detachment. Tressler just sat, silent, composed, like someone who'd waited in worse places than this. Lyra stood on the other side of the 2-way glass, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching. The room beyond her was dim, quiet. A few detectives leaned over a table covered in paperwork and digital printouts. A whiteboard near the back wall had photos clipped across it, Maylie's face in the center, surrounded by other children, some with names, some still labeled unknown. Detective Imani Chen entered from the adjacent hallway, her expression tight. "We got into his van," Lyra turned. "What did you find?" Chen handed over a tablet loaded with photos, evidence shots from the scene. Inside the vehicle, a gym bag filled with duct tape, latex gloves, a flask marked cleaning solution that turned out to be chloroform. An old Polaroid camera, a notebook with scribbled observations. One of the pages read, "No cameras in aisle 9, high shelving, low visibility, good echo." Beneath that, a list of dates. "Jesus," Lyra muttered. Chen nodded grimly. "We also found this." She handed over a second item, a folded map of Crestfield County, well-worn, creased, annotated in blue and black ink. Across the map were pins, tiny red dots marked with initials and timestamps. One next to a small park, one by a library, and another, circled in thick black marker, was labeled Tuesday, 8 a.m., Maple Way Market, low foot traffic. Lyra's throat dried. He hadn't just stumbled upon Mei Li, he had planned it. "This isn't the first time," Chen said quietly. "We found 3 other maps in his storage unit across state lines, each one with similar notations." "Were the other locations verified?" "2 of them correspond with prior missing child cases," Chen said. "One cold, one still open." Lyra stared at the map in her hands. She could see the structure now, the logic in it. He was hunting, not just opportunistically, methodically. "He watches patterns," she said. "He doesn't snatch and run. He picks the hour, the corner, the window no one's looking through." Chen exhaled, her eyes flicking toward the observation room. "And then he pretends to belong. A vendor, a restocker, a guy in a branded shirt with no name tag. Forgettable. Or if she was just another pin on his map. But she didn't. Because men like him didn't care about answers. They cared about control. They fed on the silence. And that's why it mattered that Mei Li have been found. Not just rescued, found, seen, heard. Tressler looked away first. Lyra lowered the tablet slowly. "Where's Bravo?" Chen cracked a smile, faint and tired. Passed out under Rodriguez's desk. Someone gave him a donut. Lyra didn't laugh, but something in her chest eased just a fraction. "He earned it," she said softly. Outside the interrogation room, the board of evidence was growing. One of the younger officers added a sticky note to the edge of Mei Li's photo. "Found. Crestfield. 8:42 a.m." Lyra's eyes settled on the corner of the map again. On the bold letters scribbled beside the date. Low foot traffic. He hadn't planned for Bravo, hadn't accounted for a dog's instinct, a handler's intuition. A moment of silence broken by a single growl. Lyra looked at Tressler one last time. He was no monster. That would have been easier. He was a man with a smile that never reached his eyes. A man who knew how to walk between cameras and hide in crowdless mornings. But this time he'd missed something. Not a camera, not a witness, a dog. A dog who refused to walk past aisle 9. A dog who didn't need a motive. Just a scent, a sound, a shift in the air. That was the story Lyra would write later. Not about how they caught Tressler, but how Bravo heard something no one else could. And that changed everything. The station had gone still. Evening light slanted through the blinds, painting slow-moving bars across the desk in front of her. Dust hung in the air, catching gold where it used to go unnoticed. Lyra sat alone in the back office, the door slightly ajar, the hum of distant voices muffled. Bravo lay curled at her feet, chest rising slow and steady, finally at ease. A purple bandana someone had tied around his neck earlier had slipped sideways. He didn't seem to mind. Lyra's hands hovered over her keyboard, and for a long while she didn't type a word. She just sat there, breathing, remembering. How close she had come to walking past that aisle. How her hand had already reached for the cart. How the day had begun with thoughts of eggs, toothpaste, and nothing more. And how it could have ended. Grocery aisle. Canine officer initiated alert behavior at approximately 0846. Child identified as Maylee Carson, age 6. Missing for 11 hours. Suspect, Owen Tressler. Detained by canine and responding officers near rear stockroom. Evidence includes chloroform, restraints, photographs. Further investigation pending. It was thorough. It was accurate. And it was utterly lifeless. Because the report didn't mention Maylee's trembling fingers, or how she had whispered, "Don't let him know you found me." It didn't mention how she wouldn't release her grip from Bravo's fur even when the EMTs arrived, how her body curled around his like he was the last safe place on earth. It didn't mention the aisle number, or the moment Lyra realized how heartbreakingly easy it is to miss a cry for help when it doesn't sound like a scream. So she opened a new document, not the kind with check boxes and timestamps, but one with space for breath, for truth, the kind that made people pause. And she began to write. The cereal aisle was quiet. I almost didn't notice. We weren't even supposed to be there. My shift had ended and Bravo needed food. I was thinking about groceries, not monsters. But something changed the second we stepped inside. Bravo changed. His posture stiffened. His breath slowed. He moved like something was about to break. And he led me, not wandered, not drifted, but pulled me, with purpose, to aisle 9. That's where we found her. Maylee Carson, 6 years old, eyes like river stones, trembling behind a wall of breakfast cereal, with her ankles bound and her voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She said, "Don't let him know you found me." I've carried that sentence like a weight I can't shake. Lyra stopped there, hands trembling. She looked again at Bravo. "You didn't let her be invisible," she said quietly. "You heard what we didn't." She reached down, letting her fingers rest gently behind his ear. He leaned into her touch with the familiar gravity of trust. She thought of all the times she'd seen Bravo react to things she couldn't see. The way he'd stop mid-walk to stare down a hallway. The way his nose pressed to a single shoe and told a whole story. The way he never needed words, just space to listen. That's what she wanted. Leaned back in her chair and let herself exhale.
Nurses asked Ive. Tomorrow would come with more cases, more calls. Maybe more aisle nines in other stores, other places, hiding more quiet cries. But tonight, there was stillness. Tonight, there was a girl, safe in a hospital bed, and a dog, asleep beneath a desk, who had refused to walk past something wrong. And a woman, tired, changed, grateful, who would never look at a grocery aisle the same way again. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender hand lotion, the kind the nurses dabbed on their wrists, hoping the softness would linger in a place that so often smelled like pain. Room 214. The butterfly sticker on the door was beginning to curl at the corners. Inside, Maylie lay tucked into crisp hospital sheets that looked too large for her frame. She hadn't spoken since they brought her in. Not to the doctors, not to the nurses, not even when her mother arrived, weeping, clutching her like a lifeline too long adrift. But she had spoken once. It wasn't a word, not in the way adults understood. It was the way her hand reached, slowly, uncertain, toward the soft fur of Bravo's ruff. The way her fingers trembled until they found the weight of his head resting beside her elbow. The way she breathed, truly breathed, only when his body sank to the floor and stayed, unmoving, like a sentinel that would not leave again. That was 3 days ago. Bravo had not missed a visit since. The hospital staff had made an exception. It wasn't in the rules. Service dogs weren't supposed to remain long inside patient rooms unless formally assigned. But Bravo wasn't just a dog anymore. He was the only thing Maylie responded to. So they granted him visitation clearance, a term someone in administration invented to make it official. But really, it was because the head nurse, an older woman named Georgia, had seen something she couldn't explain. She was curled up like a question mark, Georgia told Lyra, but the second your dog laid down beside her, she unfolded. Lyra remembered. She'd stood just outside the room, unsure if Bravo would be welcome, but he had pulled forward, gentle but sure, and padded into the space like he'd been there before. He didn't bark. He didn't wag. He just approached the bed, sat down, and waited. And Maylie, little Maylie, who had flinched at the sound of her own name, had looked at him with eyes that, slowly, miraculously, softened. Her hands, bound so recently by rope, had found his fur, and for a moment, the trembling stopped. Today was no different. Bravo entered the room, quiet as shadow, and settled before.
"You always know how to reach the ones hiding in silence," she whispered to Bravo, her voice low enough not to intrude. He flicked an ear. She didn't stay long during visits. She never made it official. She wasn't there to question or record. She was there because something in her heart wouldn't let her be anywhere else. The therapists were beginning to notice. "She doesn't engage," one said, "until Bravo's present. She only eats when he's in the room," another added. "Her heart rate drops by 12 points when she's touching him," said a nurse, scanning the monitor with quiet awe. A psychologist had even begun to document it. Therapeutic canine presence, patient response, case study. But Lyra didn't need data. She only needed to watch Maylie lift her hand again, just enough to let it rest on Bravo's shoulder. She didn't stroke him, didn't pet him like children often do. She simply laid her hand there, as if grounding herself to something that wouldn't vanish. One morning, Lyra brought a photo. She hesitated at the threshold before entering, unsure if it was too soon. It was from the store. A still frame from the body cam, blurred slightly, but clear enough. Bravo standing guard in aisle 9, his eyes locked onto something unseen. Lyra behind him, and just the hint of a little hand reaching from behind the cereal boxes. Lyra held the photo out gently. "She might want this," she told the nurse. Georgia looked at it, and her voice cracked when she said, "I think she already remembers it." They left the photo at Maylee's bedside. That night when Bravo returned, Maylee reached for the photo first, and then for him. Time passed differently in that room. Outside, the world turned as always. News cycles, patrol shifts, coffee brewing and cooling. But inside room 214, healing came not in milestones, but in quiet repetitions. The soft thud of paws entering, the shift of small fingers into fur, the moment when a child no longer flinched at footsteps, the way she began to sleep, truly sleep, only when Bravo curled beside her. One afternoon, Lyra sat near the window while Bravo lay half asleep on the tile. The sun poured in, warm and forgiving. She looked at Maylee, who had begun drawing on a notepad. Stick figures. 3 of them. One had a ponytail. One had floppy ears. One had a badge. Lyra swallowed hard. "You drawing me?" she asked gently. Maylee looked up, just briefly, and nodded. It was the first clear response she had given to anyone but Bravo. In that moment, Lyra realized something. Just to stay, to witness, to hold a line until light returned. The crayon moved slowly, as if it weighed more than her hand could carry. Maylee sat cross-legged on the hospital bed, knees tucked under the oversized gown, lips pressed into a thin line. The paper before her was blank, except for the first bold stroke of gray. Not blue skies, not flowers, not smiling suns like other children drew. Her pictures didn't live in the daylight. They lived in corners, behind shelves, under flickering lights, beside thick black shadows that slithered just out of frame. But always, always in the center of every page was a dog. Bravo. He never looked like a cartoon. She didn't give him silly ears or wide eyes. He looked strong, still, drawn with firm, deliberate lines, like he was holding something back, holding something off. Lyra watched from the doorway. She didn't speak, had learned not to, not when Maylee was drawing. These were the only moments the girl seemed to let her inside, not through words, but through pencil strokes and charcoal smudges. On one page, Bravo stood in front of a door with jagged scribbles behind it, all black, all teeth. On another, he was nose to nose with a tall figure made of nothing but red spirals. The figure had no eyes, just hands. Too many hands. And then there was the third drawing, the one that made Lyra press a hand to her chest. Bravo was lying beside a small figure, curled up. The girl's eyes were closed. The world around them was crumbling, walls cracked, rain falling. But Bravo didn't move. He stayed, even as everything else broke. "Does he scare them away?" Lyra asked one day, her voice like breath on glass. Maylee didn't answer, but she reached into the stack of finished papers beside her and pulled one free. She held it out. It was different than the others. No shadows, no monsters, just Bravo, sitting in a beam of light, and beside him, a girl, smiling, stick-figure arms wobbly and uneven, but unmistakably smiling. Lyra took the paper with both hands like it was holy. She didn't say thank you, didn't need to. Maylee's eyes had already said enough. Therapists had tried to ask questions. What do you remember? Did you see his face? Can you describe the van? But Maylee would shrink into herself, eyes cloudy, lips clamped tight. The trauma had buried her voice somewhere deep. a place no question could reach. Only Bravo, somehow, still had the map. When he entered the room, she softened. When he laid his head in her lap, she breathed easier. And when she drew him, it was like her memories climbed out through her fingers, quiet, careful, not to be scared away. One day, Lyra brought in a soft-bound sketchbook. Something just for your first drawing was slow, hesitant. Just Bravo's paw. Heavy, steady, anchored. Then the next page, his eyes. Not large, not cartoonish, just watching, protecting. Then came the one that made Lyra sit down slowly in the chair by the wall and not move for nearly 10 minutes. It was a picture of the cereal aisle. Each box was drawn in a simple rectangle. The shelf was crooked but detailed, and behind the boxes, barely visible, a small eye peeked through. But in the foreground, Bravo stood, still, ready, facing the darkness head-on. "He found me," Maylie whispered once, so soft Lyra nearly missed it. It was the first sentence she'd spoken aloud in days. Lyra blinked. She didn't answer with words. She just nodded, once, firm and slow. The drawings kept coming. One day it was a van, wheels too big, windows too dark. Bravo stood beside it like a wall no evil could breach. Another day it was a maze, long, narrow hallways twisting in on themselves. In the center, Maylie, lost. But Bravo was always there, at the edges, at the threshold, never far. What Maylie couldn't say, she drew, and in those drawings the story spoke for itself. Late one evening, Lyra brought her own gift, a photo printed from the station's archive. It showed Bravo at his K9 graduation, standing proud in uniform harness, Lyra at his side. "I thought you might want to know what he was before he became yours," Lyra said gently. Maylie took the photo, traced the outline of Bravo's ears with her finger. Then she flipped to the last page of her sketchbook and drew a new picture. This time it wasn't just Bravo. It was him and Lyra, side by side, smiling. And behind them, holding Bravo's leash loosely, like it had always been hers, was a little girl, hair tied up, eyes open. A word written beneath in faint, uneven letters. Safe. Some things can't be said aloud. Not yet. Not when the hurt is too fresh. Not when the world still echoes with footsteps that didn't mean love. But crayon and paper, the weight of fur under fingers, the steady breath of a dog that never walked away. Those things spoke in ways no courtroom ever could. And Lyra knew, healing doesn't always begin with words. Sometimes it begins with someone who stays, and something soft enough to hold the fear, until the voice is ready to return. The sketchbook lay open on Maylie's lap, its spine worn from repeated use, edges curled slightly where her fingers had clutched too tight. The late afternoon light filtered through the hospital block, shoulder like usual, guarding the page from curious adults. Instead, she worked slowly, intentionally, as if she were building something fragile and true, and each stroke of the crayon had to be placed exactly right, or the memory would break apart in her hands. It was late by the time she finished. Lyra had stood to say goodbye, to offer the usual warm nod and promise of return, but Maylie held the sketchbook up, both hands gripping its edges like a small offering. Lyra took it carefully. The page was silent, but it screamed. A little girl, small, stick-figured, but unmistakable, was crouched behind stacks of boxes. Her knees were tucked into her chest, her eyes wide, rimmed with shadow, and across the top of the page, written in shaky block letters, "Please don't leave me here." Above the boxes, breaking through the frame, almost tearing the page in half with its motion, was a dog, brown and black, mid-run, muscles drawn with the force of a child who remembered every ounce of power in those legs. It was Bravo, charging toward her like he had in the cereal aisle, before the world knew what was wrong, before the world cared. Lyra sat down again, but slower this time, as if her own body had become too heavy to carry the weight. She placed the sketchbook on her knees, stared at the page like it was something ancient and sacred. Her hand trembled at the edge of it, not touching, just hovering, as if she might smudge the truth. A deep inhale, then stillness. She had seen things in her career, broken bodies, crying parents, the long, numb quiet of children who had waited too long for someone to come. But she had never seen it like this, never through a child's own hand, not like this. Not a cage made of cereal boxes and fear, not a cry for help drawn in crayons, and not a dog, her dog, crashing into that moment like a promise too strong to be forgotten. Maylie didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her shoulders trembled slightly, like something inside her had unclenched, like she had finally said what needed to be said. And Lyra, for once, couldn't speak either. Her voice was somewhere in her chest, caught in the hollow behind her sternum, where pain and pride and grief all lived together like old friends. A tear slipped past her cheek before she could stop it. Bravo, sensing the shift, rose from where he'd been resting. He padded over, gentle as dusk, and nudged Lyra's thigh with his nose. Then, without needing instruction, he turned and lay beside Maylie again, his head on her lap, his body curled protectively around her small frame, as if to say, "I came once, I'll come again, you're not alone." Lyra blinked slowly, brushing a tear away with the heel of her hand. "This isn't just art," she murmured. Maylie looked at her. It was the first real eye contact in days. "This is your memory," Lyra whispered. Spread the drawing out on her desk like a map, not to be filed, not for evidence, but to understand, to honor. The shelves, the dog, the words. It wasn't a sketch. It was a moment frozen in time, and somehow even now it vibrated with urgency, with something unresolved. "Please don't leave me here." She read the words again. Not just a sentence, a plea. A fear that still echoed in the silence after bedtime. In the corners of Maylie's room, where the shadows hadn't yet learned to be gentle, Lyra picked up her pen. She began writing, not as a detective, not for a report, but as someone who had stood at the edge of something terrible and nearly missed it. Someone who had almost walked past aisle 9, who had almost treated Bravo's alert as a false alarm, who had nearly left a 6-year-old girl behind a wall of cereal and silence. Her hand moved faster now, not just recording facts, but writing down everything that could have been lost, everything that wasn't, because of Bravo, because of instinct, because of the way one dog had refused to let fear win. Back in the hospital room, Maylie traced her finger along Bravo's back as he lay beside her. The paper cage still rested on her tray, but she didn't flip the page. She didn't need to hide it. It wasn't just the drawing of something horrible anymore. It was the proof of what she survived, and who had come for her. Not a knight, not a superhero, just a dog with steady eyes, and a heart that ran toward the cry no one else heard. It started with a knock on Lyra's office door. Soft, measured, but behind it, urgency. She looked up from Maylie's file, eyes tired from hours spent revisiting every note, every drawing, every moment. Agent Monroe stepped in, FBI, crisp suit, 5 o'clock shadow, and a manila envelope held tightly in his hand like it might bruise if he loosened his grip. "We got the hit," he said. Lyra stood. He placed the folder on her desk without sitting. DNA from the van. One strand on a hoodie in the back seat, another on a discarded juice box beneath the shelving unit at the store. Both matched entries in the National Missing Persons database. Her stomach turned. "Which case?" He looked at her. 2. The first was a girl, Delilah Hart, missing 4 months ago in Indiana, found wandering outside a bus depot in Missouri 3 weeks later. No memory of how she got there. No one saw who left her. She had been disoriented, malnourished, told doctors someone nice brought her snacks, wouldn't say more, or couldn't. They'd thought it was a trafficking case. Then the trail went cold, until now. Tressler's DNA was on her shirt, and suddenly, everything Delilah hadn't been able to say began making horrifying sense. Animal at first. Shredded backpack. No sign of struggle. But now? Tressler had purchased fuel at a gas station less than 4 miles from the campsite that night. And his van? Its tires matched the partial tracks recovered near a side road the police hadn't followed far enough. No one had made the connection before, because no one had been looking at it through the right lens, through Maylee's lens. Lyra sat down slowly, the folder still unopened before her. "You think this was part of something bigger?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Monroe exhaled, leaning against the edge of her desk. "I don't think he picked Maylee at random. I think he watched, followed, knew the routine, knew when the store was quiet, when a kid could vanish without a scream." He paused. "And I think he's done it before." Lyra's eyes drifted to the whiteboard behind her, the one she had once used for training sessions, long since overtaken by photos, maps, and scribbled timelines. Bravo's picture was there too, not out of vanity, but because none of this would have been found without him. She imagined the way he stood that day, alert, teeth slightly bared, tension humming beneath his coat like electricity. He'd known, even before she did. "I pulled his employment history," Monroe continued. "It's murky. No taxes filed under his name for over a decade. Lived off-grid. Rented vans under aliases. Paid cash. The store incident was a fluke, a deviation." Lyra looked up. "He was slipping?" she asked. "Or escalating?" The silence that followed was heavier than words. When Lyra finally opened the folder, it wasn't the forensic reports that shook her. It was the photo of Delilah, smiling awkwardly, hands folded, hair too long for her small face. There was a shadow in her eyes, something wounded, familiar. Something she'd just seen in Maylee, the way she flinched at closing doors, the way her fingers tightened around Bravo's fur, even in sleep. Lyra swallowed hard. "These cases were never connected," she said. Monroe nodded. "Different states, different victim profiles. No forced entry, no ransom, no obvious motive. But same method," Lyra added quietly. "Always watching, always waiting, and always a child, alone." Later that night, in the quiet of the K9 unit's kennel yard, Lyra sat on the low wooden bench beside Bravo's run. He came to her immediately, pressing his head into her chest. She leaned in, arms folding around his thick neck. "I was going to write a report," she murmured into his fur. "But it's not a report anymore, is it?" She felt Bravo shift, his breath steady against her shoulder. It's a That moment, she knew. This wasn't the end of a rescue. It was the beginning of an unraveling. The conference room inside the regional FBI field office felt colder than any street Lyra had patrolled. Frosted glass, humming LED panels, a long table buried in evidence bags and half-drained coffee cups. Above it all stretched a corkboard the size of a small billboard, threaded with red yarn, timestamps, map clippings, and the hollow-eyed faces of children who had not made the news long enough to stay in the nation's memory. Lyra stood near the far corner, jacket unbuttoned, fingers wrapped around a styrofoam cup gone tepid. On the board, a new photo had just been pinned. Owen Tressler's storage unit. Unit 47, Midwest Self-Storage. its metal door rolled high like the lid of a coffin. Inside, neat plastic tubs stacked to the ceiling, each labeled with month-year codes, each a silent indictment of years spent planning what only instinct had stopped. Across the table, Special Agent Monroe clicked a slide projector. Thock. A grainy image filled the wall. Burner phones arranged in rows on an evidence sheet, SIM cards numbered in Sharpie. Another click. Fake vendor badges, each with Tressler's photo under a different name. Harold, Logan, Drew. Another. Printed store schedules with yellow highlights marking low traffic hours, circled in red ink.
4 storage units in 3 states.
Monroe said, voice steady but tight.
We recovered ledger notebooks, lists of school dismissal times, and a catalog of grocery store floor plans. He mapped employee break rotations. He even logged seasonal aisle resets.
A detective from Tall Pines PD let out a low whistle. Guy ran kidnapping like supply chain logistics. Lyra's gaze drifted to the far end of the board where Delilah Hart's case file now sat beside a blank silhouette labeled Dante Morales.
Missing.
A single red thread connected both to a photo of Tressler's van. Why now? She asked, words soft but carrying. Why did he deviate? Silence settled like dust. Monroe answered first.
Patterns break for 2 reasons: escalation or error. He'd rehearsed so long he probably believed he couldn't be caught. That confidence breeds mistakes.
And Bravo heard one, Lyra finished. At the mention of the dog, heads turned. He wasn't in the room, but his presence clung to every diagram, every newfound lead. An invisible signature scrawled across the task force's momentum. 2 agents rolled in a steel cart stacked with evidence crates. They popped the first lid. Inside lay rows of children's backpacks, washed, folded, tagged by date. The room fell quiet. Lyra set down her coffee. This isn't trophies, Monroe murmured, labeled sample. A chilling reminder that he'd tested models before snatching the real thing. Lyra's chest tightened. She thought of Maylee tracing Bravo's back with shy fingers, sketchbook balanced on wobbly knees. A forensic tech lifted another bag, a rolled poster tube sealed with tape. Inside, a blueprint of Westlake Plaza Mall, marked exits, camera dead zones. Dated 3 months from now. He'd already chosen the next site, the tech said. And the next child, Lyra whispered. The autopsy of Tressler's system unfolded hour by hour. Digital forensics tracing Bitcoin payments for prepaid phones, DMV records for vans bought at auctions, automated plate readers catching him on 2 a.m. service road cameras. Each thread revealed a mind that treated children as logistics, fear as inventory. But every pattern, Monroe emphasized, had an interrupt vector. Lyra glanced at her phone. Background photo of Bravo in graduation vest. Interrupt vector, she thought. Instinct with teeth. Agent Chen, head of victim outreach, slid a laptop toward Lyra. Your report, the narrative one, helped cross-reference the serial aisle detail with a 2017 Utah case. Same shelving tactic, different brand displays. Kid was never found. Parents thought she wandered off. Lyra felt heat crawl up her neck. The story she'd written for clarity, not protocol, had cracked another sealed door. It's not just evidence, Chen continued. It's language. Survivors remember unconventional things. How cereal smelled, the sound of a dog. Your report gave them permission to speak those fragments. Lyra exhaled, pulse fluttering. Healing, she realized. could be forensic. Near dusk, she stepped outside into the parking lot wind. Bravo waited in the back of her cruiser, ears perked, tail thumping when he saw her. She opened the hatch, sat on the bumper, and let him press his weight against her side. "You broke him, partner," she said, threading fingers through his fur. Not with force, with listening. Overhead, the station's floodlights clicked on, pooling white across asphalt like spilled moonlight. Somewhere in the building, analysts kept extracting timestamps. Somewhere farther, parents waited by silent phones. But here, in the hush between shift changes, Lyra allowed herself a breath. "It was systemic," she murmured, gaze on the glowing windows. "But now, so are we." Bravo's eyes met hers, calm and steady, as if to say, the work had only just begun. And Lyra understood. Sometimes just surfaced. Trembling voices, half-forgotten details, the same name murmured in fragile recognition. "I saw him. He wore a red shirt. He was so helpful, I never even wondered." Lyra was at her desk, finalizing the day's avalanche of reports, when the call that mattered most cracked through the static. "Crestfield PD, this is Detective Munro." Silence. Not the awkward pause of uncertainty, but the weighty hush of someone gathering courage scattered months ago. "Ma'am?" Lyra softened her tone. "I'm here." A breath, shaky, like wind through dry leaves. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right." "You're doing fine." Lyra glanced at the recording indicator, on. "Tell me whatever you can." "My name is Helen Alvarez." The words were brittle. "My daughter, Marisol, went missing in April." Lyra's pulse skipped. She remembered the bulletin. 7 years old, last seen outside Lunamart in Mason County, 2 hours south. Helen continued, voice tightening. "I saw the news about the little girl in the cereal aisle, the dog. They showed the man's picture. The suspect, I think I met him." Lyra leaned forward. "When?" "The day Marisol disappeared. I was loading groceries. She was buckling herself in." Helen's breath hitched. "A man asked if I needed help with my bags. He wore a red store vest, but no name tag. He was so kind. Smiled, told my daughter she had pretty barrettes." A tremor ran through her words. I never thought." Lyra kept her own voice steady, anchoring Helen's. "You did nothing wrong. You're helping her now. Can you describe him?" She did. Sandy hair, faded baseball cap, calm eyes that didn't quite meet hers, and a tiny mole near his ear. Lyra remembered seeing the same mark on Tressler's booking photo. Helen's voice broke. "When I turned to return the cart, the passenger door was open. She was gone." Silence swelled between them, raw, unbearable. Then Lyra asked gently, "May I send agents to you? They can collect a new statement, show you photos?" "Yes," Helen whispered, "please." A heartbeat later. "Thank you for finding that girl, and for listening." When the line went dead, Lyra closed her eyes, pressing her palm to her chest, as though she could shield the mother's grief from echoing through her ribs. The next 24 hours unfolded like falling tiles. Helen's detailed recollection unlocked CCTV review the original investigators had missed. Footage of a red polo man hovering by the loading bay, never scanning merchandise, always watching. Detectives looped in agent. Crestfield's main conference room was alive with pinpoints on digital maps. Every new call lit another place Tressler had touched. Lyra stood before the board, heart pounding at the sheer spread, gas stations, campgrounds, grocery chains up the interstate. A breadth of predation only instinct had finally tripped. Captain Rhodes addressed the room. "We'll reopen every matching missing child report since 2012. The Bureau's behavioral unit believes he operated in cycles, approximately every 6 months." Lyra's jaw clenched. 12 years, too many pins, too many unreturned backpacks. Yet there was momentum now, raw, determined, unstoppable. Because one German shepherd had refused to keep walking. Late afternoon, Lyra visited Maylee's hospital room. Bravo trotted ahead, nails tapping tile like small drums of certainty. Inside, Maylee was coloring, head bent low. Lyra knelt beside the bed. "Your story helped someone today." Maylee's hand paused. "There's a mom who thought no one would believe her. She saw your hero on TV, and now she's talking to the FBI. That means they can look again for her little girl." Maylee's eyes lifted, question pooled in brown glass. Lyra smiled softly. "You and Bravo, your bravery. It's helping others find their voices too." The girl's gaze slid to Bravo, then back to Lyra. A whisper. "Will they find her?" "We'll try," Lyra promised. "All of us." Maylee reached to stroke Bravo's ear. He leaned in, sighing like an old tree bending to wind. It wasn't words. It was enough. Just past midnight, Lyra stood alone on the precinct steps, city lights glittering like jarred stars. She dialed Helen Alvarez, who answered on the first ring. "I wanted you to know," Lyra said. "The task force is searching 2 properties linked to the suspect. We won't stop." Through the phone came a breath that was not yet relief, but less than despair. "Thank you," Helen whispered. "Whatever happens, thank that dog for me." Lyra smiled into the dark. "I will." Hanging up, she looked down at Bravo lying at her feet, head on paws, ever watchful. "You feel that, boy?" she asked. "That ripple?" Bravo's tail thumped once against the concrete. "Yes," Lyra murmured, almost to herself. "That's the sound of monsters losing their shadows." And under the slim August moon, she believed it. Because the phone kept ringing, grief turning into testimony, silence into leads. Each call a stitch in a net wide enough, finally, to hold the weight of the missing. All because a single growl in a quiet aisle had dared too large on her chest. In her other hand, a sketchbook, with Bravo drawn on every page. A talisman. Bravo sat beside her, vest fastened, patch reading, "Court Support Canine. Do not pet unless you're Maylee." He met her eyes. Tail swept once across polished marble. "I'm here." Ada Lillian Harris approached, smiling gently. Judge approved the comfort dog motion. No objections. She knelt. Bravo gets sworn in too. Paw on the Bible and everything. She winked. Maylee gave the smallest smile, but it was real. Earlier they'd rehearsed in a quiet room. Lyra had knelt beside her. "You don't need to remember everything, just your truth." She handed Maylee a note card with 3 carefully chosen sentences. "He said my mom wouldn't find me. I was quiet, so nobody would get hurt. Bravo heard me, even when I didn't talk." Now, minutes before the hearing, Lyra crouched. "Want to sit?" Maylee nodded. They sat on a bench, Bravo curled at her feet. Lyra smoothed her hair. "Remember, People need stories to understand. Yours matters. A clerk arrived. Voir dire in 5. She handed Maylie a peppermint. The girl unwrapped it like a shield. Across the corridor, the defense attorney, Price, looked over notes. His glance toward Maylie was calculating, but not cruel. Lyra shifted slightly. Bravo's ears lifted. Air stirred. Inside, the courtroom smelled of wood polish and old books. Sunlight cut across the judge's bench. Dust swirled like secrets made visible. "Call the witness," the bailiff said. Maylie stepped forward, Bravo by her side, Lyra steadying the leash. "Raise your right hand, miss, if you can," the bailiff said. Maylie lifted her hand. Bravo, unprompted, raised his paw too. Laughter rippled through the room. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" Maylie looked at Lyra, then Bravo. Both nodded. "I do," she whispered. Bravo gave a single bark. The judge smiled. "Paw prints count in my court." Harris approached. Voice soft, questions simple. "Did someone tell you your mom wouldn't find you?" "Yes," Maylie whispered. "Were you quiet because someone might get hurt?" "Yes, ma'am." "Who heard you, even when you didn't talk?" Maylie breathed in. Bravo. Defense took the floor. "Wide," Maylie replied. "Not empty. I drew them before I knew his name." "No further questions," Price said quietly. Court recessed. Judge Sinclair ruled to bind the case over for trial, then turned to Maylie. "Miss Carson, your courage lit this room. And Officer Bravo." She leaned forward. "Honorary deputy." A blue ribbon with the county crest was clipped to his vest. His tail thumped approval. In the hallway, Maylie sagged into Lyra's side. "Was that okay?" Lyra's smile broke like sunlight. "That was perfect." Maylie buried her face in Bravo's fur and cried. Not in fear, but in release. He didn't move, just stayed. The courtroom returned to hush as Maylie retook the stand. Outside, the sun blazed. Inside, time paused for her breath. Bravo lay beneath the witness box. Blue ribbon gleamed. To the gallery, he looked regal. To Maylie, he was gravity. Harris resumed gently. "Maylie, do you remember who put you behind the cereal boxes?" "Yes." "Do you see him here?" She pointed at Owen Tressler. The room held its breath. "How did you recognize him?" "His eyes didn't smile," she said. "Explain." "When people smile for real, their eyes get warm. His were cold, like glass." "Did anyone hear you call for help?" Maylie shook her head. "Why not?" She stroked Bravo's ear. "Because he said, if I made noise, my mom would never find me." "But someone did find you?" "Yes." "Who?" "The dog." "His name?" "Bravo." Then in a whisper, "But I also call him Rex, like in my drawings." "Maylie," Harris asked softly, "what made you believe someone could still hear you?" Maylie breathed. "Because Rex heard me, even when I didn't make sound." A silence so profound it felt holy. Then Price returned, gentle but probing. "You didn't speak, so how do you know the dog heard you?" She touched Bravo's fur. "Because he came." You might have imagined it. No, she said again. He found me. Maybe you were scared and remembered wrong. Scared makes eyes wide, she repeated, not empty. She held up her sketchbook. I drew them that way before I knew his name. Price stared. No further questions. Judge Sinclair leaned forward. Miss Carson, thank you for your bravery. Maylie slid down from the stand. Bravo rose. They exited the courtroom. Sketchbook. The cereal aisle again, but this time, the girl walks out of the shadows. Bravo beside her, light flooding through an open door. She handed it to Lyra, and that's where this chapter ends, not with applause, but with a courtroom stilled by truth. Not with anger, but with a child's quiet reclaiming of voice. Because one dog heard her, and the world at last listened. For you, she whispered. Lyra folded the page carefully, like scripture. Outside, courthouse bells chimed the hour. Inside, an entire system shifted, ever so slightly, toward justice, nudged by the quiet testimony of a child, and the dog who'd heard her before anyone else had tried to listen. 2 hours after Maylie left the stand, courtroom 2B filled again. Attorneys returned, spectators hushed, the air tingling with verdict-shy electricity. Judge Sinclair entered, robes swishing like distant thunder. She carried a single sheet of paper. Owen Tressler did not rise from the defense table. He stared straight ahead, jaw ticking, as if the room were no more than wallpaper. Yet the cuffs on his wrists seemed heavier now, like percussion to the heartbeat he tried to hide. Having reviewed testimony, physical evidence, and the defendant's interstate pattern, Sinclair began, voice iron soft. This court determines probable cause for federal jurisdiction under Title 18, Sections 1201 and 2423. She looked over her glasses, gaze settling on Tressler like cold rain. Accordingly, this matter is bound over to the United States District Court for multi-state prosecution. A collective inhale, a few murmurs of thank God fluttered like moths. The gavel fell, sharp, definitive. With a single strike, county lines vanished, and the full weight of federal resources shifted onto the man in the red prison jumpsuit. For the first time all day, Tressler blinked hard. Control, his favorite weapon, was gone. Press rows erupted into frantic note-scribbling. Parents of other missing children, seated shoulder to shoulder, exhaled tears they'd held for months. One mother clutched a laminated flyer, edges frayed. "Have you seen Caleb?" She pressed the photo to her chest, eyes closing, not relief yet, but possibility. Detective Chen stood in the aisle, phone buzzing non-stop with notifications. DHS Victim Assist Unit offering manpower, a senator's office requesting briefing, 3 more tips linked to grocery store abductions filtering through the bureau hotline. Chen whispered to Lyra, "They're coming out of the woodwork. Kids, parents, clerks who thought they imagined something." Lyra nodded, heart hammering. Maylie's 7 sentences and one dog's unwavering stillness had fractured a dam. Bravo granted. No bark, no growl. Yet entire legal gears turned because he had once refused to keep walking. Someone in the back whispered, "That dog changed everything." The phrase ricocheted against wood paneling, took root. As marshals moved to transfer Tressler, he finally looked across the courtroom, to Maylie's empty seat, to Bravo resting like a stone lion, to Lyra watching with measured calm. His mouth twitched, not quite a sneer, more a grimace of a man seeing, perhaps for the first time, that invisibility has limits. The marshals nudged him forward, Chains clinked, a sound that felt almost ceremonial. An audible punctuation mark at the end of his reign of hush. Outside the hallway brimmed with reporters. ADA Harris stepped to the microphones. Effective immediately, a joint federal task force will consolidate all interstate child abduction evidence. If you believe you encountered Mr. Tressler, she gestured to the mugshot, call the number behind me. A banner unfurled, 1-800, heard me. Simple, unforgettable. Inspired by a 7-year-old's testimony, Lyra stood to the side, Maylee's drawing folder tucked beneath her arm. She watched parents approach the table, trembling fingers dialing the hotline on personal phones, murmuring details long buried. Produce aisle, silent man, eyes that didn't smile. Each call a match flicked into darkness. In a small witness room, Maylee sat on a couch sipping apple juice, swinging socked feet above the carpet. The day's exhaustion ringed her eyes, yet a lightness hovered at her shoulders, as if she'd set down a suitcase years too heavy. Lyra knelt. The judge decided to move the case. That means more people can help stop him. You did that. Maylee looked thoughtful. Because I talked? Because you told the truth, Lyra corrected gently. And because Bravo showed everyone how to listen. Maylee glanced at the dog now sprawled contentedly on the floor. He never lets monsters win. Neither do you, Lyra said. A shy smile curved the girl's lips, the kind that reaches the eyes. That night, national news broadcast clips of Judge Sinclair's ruling. Anchors spoke of a courageous child witness, and Bravo, the canine hero. The hotline number scrolled across screens. Within hours, 63 new leads poured in from 5 states. But the most powerful images weren't of flashing sirens or perp walks. They were of a little girl resting her hand on a dog's head. Eyes steady, voice unwavering as she said, his eyes didn't smile. Across liver, 7-year-old girl and a dog shifted the balance of silence and sound. Her whisper became an indictment, his presence a verdict. A predator lost the one thing he treasured most, silence. Tomorrow, more voices will rise, because one already did. She hit save, closed the lid, and looked at Bravo, curled on the rug. Ready for the next voice? She asked. His tail thumped, soft percussion in a quiet room. Lyra exhaled, feeling the world tilt ever so slightly toward justice. Crestfield's town square shimmered beneath summer sun. Cobalt bunting fluttering from lampposts, folding chairs lining the courthouse lawn. A brass quintet tuned under a gazebo marked with ribbons that read K9 Bravo Appreciation Day. It felt like the 4th of July, without the fireworks. Gratitude, not noise, filled the air. Children chased bubbles near the fountain. Retirees arrived early with blankets. Shopkeepers paused work to stand curbside. At the center of a makeshift stage stood a carved plaque, a German shepherd silhouette above the words, "He heard what we missed." Bravo, the dog, sat at the base of the steps. His vest was brushed, his badge polished. He scanned calmly, taking in the scent of kettle corn and the hum of gathered hearts. Officer Lyra Monroe stood beside him in dress blues, a folded speech trembling in her pocket. When Mayor Dorian Gray, yes, they teased him about the name, stepped up to the podium, he declared August 12th officially K9 Bravo Day, honoring the dog who'd noticed what no one else did, in aisle 9 of a grocery store. The crowd applauded, soft and rolling. Lyra gave Bravo a scratch beneath his collar. When the mayor invited her to speak, she froze, then climbed the steps, abandoned her script, and faced the quiet. "I've spent years training police dogs," she began. "You teach them to listen to you. But this dog, he taught me to listen to the quiet." She described the stillness in aisle 9. No screams, no glass breaking, just a child, frozen with fear. And Bravo, refusing to move on. "I used to think I trained this dog," she said. "Turns out he trained me. To slow down, to trust instinct, to hear a child even when the world's loud with grocery store music." Her eyes found Maylee in the crowd, a small girl in a blue ribbon. Maylee pressed her hands together in encouragement. "This day isn't about medals, it's about a promise. To act before silence becomes loss." Applause came like waves. Bravo rose, padded to Lyra, leaned into her side, cried. "He protected my Emma too," one whispered. Children gave Bravo hand-drawn thank-you cards. One boy said, "You're the reason I'm not scared of stores anymore," and hugged him tight. Bravo tolerated the squeeze, tail wagging in quiet approval. But the most poignant moment came when Maylee rose, sketchbook in hand. She stepped onto the stage and presented a drawing. Bravo in front of a door, kids smiling behind him. At the top, "He keeps us safe." Gasps and applause filled the square. Lyra looked at Bravo, eyes shining. He gently nudged Maylee's elbow, his way of saying thanks. That evening, Lyra placed the city's proclamation beside her late father's badge on the mantel. Bravo curled beside her on the couch. "Think we made them listen?" she asked. Bravo chuffed, head in her lap. Outside, laughter drifted in. Inside, one woman and one dog rested in the glow of a town changed, not by force, but by noticing what others missed. The next morning at Greenwood Elementary, sunlight spilled down polished corridors. Second-grade artwork hung in lines, planets, hand turkeys, and one new piece, Maylee's drawing, taped center stage. He heard me. Lyra followed Principal Ruiz to classroom 2B. Bravo's nails clicked softly on the floor. Children whispered, "That's him." Maylee sat in the front row, hands folded. When Bravo entered, the class gasped, then squealed. Lyra crouched. "Hey, partner." Maylee smiled and scratched Bravo behind the ears. From Lyra's satchel she pulled out a midnight blue backpack, stitched with silver and a patch. He heard me. Inside a laminated badge. Name, Maylee Carson. Role, official Bravo partner. Clearance, unlimited hugs and hero duties. Maylee hesitated. "Is it really for me?" "You earned it," Lyra said, "the day you spoke your truth." Maylee hugged Bravo fiercely, no fear this time, just courage. The class applauded. Ms. Adler dabbed tears. Even Ruiz pretended to adjust his glasses. Students had prepared questions. "Does Bravo dream?" one boy asked. "Yes," Lyra said. "We think he's running hero laps." "Is Maylee gonna be a police officer now?" "Maybe an artist," Maylee replied, "but I'll help Bravo when kids need him." "Can Bravo smell fear?" Lyra answered gently. He smells changes, heartbeats, chemicals. That's how he knew Maylie walked among them. And she was not alone. It began with a drawing. One Tuesday evening, Georgia, the nurse who first petitioned for Bravo's hospital badge, found Maylie's artwork tucked inside her planner. On impulse, she scanned it and added it to a community health newsletter. A few hours later, the image trended. A tweet. When a canine becomes a child's shield, fear has nowhere to hide. Then came reposts, blogs, national news. By that night, a primetime anchor held the drawing on screen. Sometimes heroes come on 4 paws, she said, and sometimes the bravest storytellers are 7 years old. Emails flooded the Crestfield PD inbox. I never told anyone until I saw Maylie's picture. My son stopped speaking. Her drawing helped us talk again. I'm 67, abused in the 60s. That little girl gave me the courage to speak. Lyra pinned each message beside her desk. She read them to Bravo during night shifts. He thumped his tail in rhythm. NPR aired a segment. Podcast hosts broke down canine empathy. Classrooms used the image for Courage Week. Bulletin boards asked, "Who hears you when you're scared?" First graders drew protectors, dragons, rabbits, sisters. Maylie's story turned fear into color, silence into speech. Late one night, Lyra received a call. A woman whispered, "My brother disappeared in '95. No one believed me. That drawing, it's exactly what I remember." The case reopened. A new seam of possibility formed. Bravo nudged Lyra's arm. She smiled. "Good job starting a revolution, partner." 2 weeks later, a mural was unveiled on the library wall. Maylie painted the final brushstroke herself, light around Bravo's ears. Hundreds gathered. Reporters asked what she hoped people would feel. Her answer was simple: safe. The mural went viral again. The drawing became a postal stamp. Proceeds funded therapy dog programs. Online, a movement formed. #Heard by Bravo. Survivors traded therapist names, shared coping tools, posted pictures of dogs. One librarian wrote, "I finally booked my first therapy session." For once, headlines led with healing, not horror. Bravo knew none of this. He lounged on Lyra's couch, chewing a squeaky toy shaped like the Capitol. But every email, every tweet, every story read aloud made his tail thump once. A heartbeat echo. One evening, Lyra drove Maylie past the mural. Streetlights glowed. Crickets sang. Maylie, half asleep, whispered, "People stand in front of it and say brave things." "They do," Lyra replied. "I think drawings are doors. They open, and stories walk out." Lyra smiled. "Yours opened a lot." Bravo whuffed softly. Dog speak for yes. Office. Letters still arrive, stacked, tied with ribbon. The first drawing hangs above her desk. On hard nights, she traces the words, "The dog who didn't let me be afraid." And to every child still hiding behind shelves, she whispers, "We hear you now." Late afternoon sun filtered into the precinct hallway as Lyra reached for the overtime roster and found a cream envelope instead. No return address, just an embossed logo, a paw atop a child's hand, circled by the words, "Paws of Promise, Trauma Therapy Partnership." Inside, a letter. "Officer Monroe, your story, and Bravo's, has become a beacon. We pair retired service dogs with young trauma survivors and seek an ambassador team to represent us nationally. We invite Bravo to be that face. Dr. Celia Wren, Executive Director." Lyra read it twice. Ambassador. Retired. She glanced down. Bravo looked up, tail thumping once. In Chief Ramirez's office, sunset glinted off blinds as he read the letter aloud. They're good people, he said. FBI liaison recommends them. He's only 6, Lyra said. Still has years of service. Maybe. But Bravo's not just a working dog anymore. He's a symbol. Symbols go farther. She hesitated. Am I doing this for him or me? Ramirez smiled. You once said he taught you to listen to the quiet. What's the quiet saying now? She closed her eyes and didn't hear sirens. She heard children's laughter. That night on the porch, Lyra flipped through the program booklet. Smiling kids hugging graying dogs, testimonials like, I told Bear my secret first. She looked at Bravo. Think you're ready to trade flashbangs for crayons? He gave a half grin. She chuckled. Maybe I'm the one who's not ready. She remembered their first patrol. He'd been all ears and limbs, but he found a suspect under a porch at midnight. They'd grown into each other. But Aisle 9 changed everything. From then on, Bravo's beat outgrew Crestfield. If we do this, she whispered, we do it your way, just listening. He nudged her hand. Somewhere, wind chimes rang. At the station the next day, officers waved. Rumors true? Rodriguez asked. Bravo retiring to the big leagues? Therapy leagues, Lyra said with a smile that didn't quite reach. Back in her cruiser, the empty seat beside her felt wrong. At a red light, she glanced over, instinctively expecting brown eyes. Later, Dr. Wren's email arrived. We can tailor the ambassador role. He'll still visit Crestfield regularly. A compromise. Gentle partner badge. Borrow it if you miss him. That sealed it. That night, under fluorescent lights, Lyra signed the transfer form. Capitaldine Bravo ID number 7834. Reassigned. Pause of promise. National Ambassador. Crestfield Outreach. Monthly. She hit send. A bell chimed, subtle and affirming. When the white SUV arrived, Dr. Wren stepped out, kneeling so Bravo could sniff her hand. His new vest read Ambassador. Lyra handed over a bag with his toy, dental chews, and Maylee's drawing. Remember, she whispered, listen first, bark second. He licked her chin. She laughed. Okay, maybe bark a little. As the SUV pulled away, she stood silent until the taillights vanished. Not an ending, an echo, carried forward. 3 weeks later, Bravo padded into Riverbend Middle School in Tennessee. Trauma Awareness Week posters lined the walls.
You're safe to speak.
Lyra wore slacks, not uniform. Today wasn't about authority. It was about invitation. Dr. Wren explained the format. Tell Bravo's story, then breakout circles with counselors. Backstage, the projector displayed Maylee's drawing. The dog who didn't let me be afraid. The auditorium filled with 8th graders, hoodies pulled over anxious wrists. Dr. Wren opened with calm warmth. Some dogs hear what silence hides. She told of Aisle 9. Lyra joined, speaking not of horror, but of instinct. If your heart is carrying a secret, she said, Bravo will hear even what you can't say aloud. Applause followed, cautious but real. Then the meet and greet began. One by one, students knelt to pet Bravo. Some whispered thanks. Some stayed longer. Then came Ethan. He stood last in line, hands deep in his sleeves, one eye hidden by hair. His name tag, Ethan, grade 8. He didn't reach out, just stood, breathing fast. Bravo didn't move, just watched. Then Ethan whispered, I didn't tell anyone what happened to me, but I think I want to now, because she could. He glanced at the drawing behind them. Bravo lowered his head to Ethan's knee. The boy exhaled, a breath held for too long. He stroked Bravo's fur, tears rising. Lyra crouched nearby, silent. Ethan spoke, halting pieces, camp, cousin, nightmares. And Bravo simply stayed. Eventually, a counselor knelt beside them. "You're brave," she said. Ethan nodded. Later, Ethan drafted a disclosure statement with her. As the auditorium emptied, Bravo remained, calm, present, guardian. "That," Dr. Wren whispered backstage, "is why we asked for him." Lyra nodded. "Lighter. Lighter," Lyra echoed. The word glowed like a lantern on the dashboard. Weeks later, Lyra arrived for what she thought was a briefing, but found the unit lined up in a horseshoe. Streamers hung. A banner read, "Once a partner, always a partner." "Morning, retirees," someone called. "Plural?" Lyra asked. Chief Ramirez stepped forward with a ceremonial box. "K9 Bravo, front and center." Bravo trotted up. Ramirez opened the lid, revealing a polished brass badge. "K9 Bravo, 2020 to 2026. He heard what we missed. Honorably retired, forever watching." He pinned it to Bravo's vest, beneath the ambassador patch. Cameras clicked. Someone sniffled. "Most dogs get a bone," Ramirez said. "This one gets a second career saving spirits." The room erupted in applause. There were pup cakes, Springsteen on the playlist, and memories swirling like confetti. Lyra stepped onto a dais made of stacked evidence boxes. "6 years ago, I thought bravery was sirens and takedowns," she said. "Bravo taught me it's also the hush between them." She told them about Ethan, about inboxes of letters. One mother had written, "His quiet eyes loud hailer my daughter's pain." "This isn't goodbye," Lyra said. "It's reassignment. Bravo's beat just got bigger, and lucky me, I'm still his driver." Bravo nudged her elbow, huffing into the mic. Laughter broke tears. At the end, Chief Ramirez handed her one last envelope, a laminated ID labeled Unit U1R, title Community Guardian. Attached, a magnetic sensor for Bravo's collar. "Whenever he enters a registered school," the chief explained, "a paw print appears on the front desk screen. Kids will know he's in the building." Lyra smiled. A digital bark. Later, she passed Maple Way Market. New cameras, widened aisles. She slowed, not haunted now, just remembering. At a red light, she glanced at Bravo. His badge caught the sun. "Retirement looks good on you," she said. He yawned. "Semi-retirement," she amended. At home, she placed his badge box beside Maylee's drawing. On the porch swing, journal on her lap, she sat while Bravo sprawled nearby. Crickets chirped. Fireflies sparked Morse code in the hedge. And inside that quiet, she heard what mattered. A growl in aisle 9. A child's whisper. A room full of applause. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Wren. "Tomorrow's roster full. Bring extra cards." A photo followed. Folding chairs in a circle. Center rug marked by a paw print. Writing contest. Grades K through 8. Theme: What Courage Looks Like. Maylee paused in front of it. Her hand brushed her sketchbook. Miss Adler knelt nearby. "Thinking of entering?" "Maybe," Maylee replied, voice small but sure. That afternoon in art club, she opened a fresh notebook, the kind with lines, not blank pages. She stared at the paper, white as old hospital sheets, then wrote the title, "The Dog Who Listened First." She didn't write about duct tape or shadows. She wrote about a growl that felt like a promise, a whisper that bloomed, a hand that found fur the way ships find lighthouse beams. Some heroes don't talk. They feel big feelings for you. Because he heard me, I learned to hear myself. She signed it, Maylee Carson, age 7, sealed it, and didn't let doubt in. Weeks passed. Pumpkin patches, frost on the slides, long division. Then, on a Thursday in November, a gold star appeared beside a list of finalists. There it was, Grade 2, Maylee Carson, Crestfield Elementary. Her heart pounded. She whispered, "Bravo did it." Because they were a team. She wrote, he listened. In December, she traveled to Nashville. The auditorium was full of big lights, big people. Maylee stepped on stage holding a hand-sewn felt Bravo toy. Heroes can be quiet, she read. They can have pause and a nose that understands fear. He listened first, so I could speak. When she finished, the room exhaled as one. The judges smiled. Moments later, the announcer called, "First place, grades K through 2, The Dog Who Listened First, by Maylee Carson." Applause bloomed. A ribbon settled on her neck. Flashbulbs popped. But the most lasting moment came after. An elderly judge knelt, eye level. "You won not for tragedy, but for truth wrapped in gentleness. That takes more craft than most adults." Maylee flushed. "Thank you." The woman tapped the ribbon. "Keep writing. The world needs listeners who can speak." Crestfield threw a celebration in the mural room. The mayor gave Maylee a fountain pen engraved "Story Keeper." Bravo, fresh off a therapy visit, sat proudly beside her. Reporters asked for a quote. Maylee said only, "My story belongs to everyone who's afraid to tell theirs." Letters arrived, addressed to Maylee and Bravo, co-authors. Teachers requested permission to read her piece during Safety Week. Told her club, "Draw a place where you feel braver." She demonstrated on the easel a teal treehouse with Bravo at the bottom. "He's not a dog," she told a classmate. "He's Bravo." Around the room, kids sketched forts, grandma gardens, even game consoles. But one little girl, Junie, froze. Maylee knelt. "What color feels safe?" Junie shrugged. "Try periwinkle. It's like sky that never storms." Junie drew a swing set. She smiled just a little. Maylee gave a thumbs up. Midway through, a soft tap echoed. Lyra opened the door. Bravo entered, therapy vest neat, tail sweeping. Maylee told the group, "Before petting, breathe slow. He feels your heart." The kids obeyed. "Does Bravo draw?" Liam asked. "He listens to pictures," Maylee answered. Cleanup followed a rhythm. Clap, clap, pause, clap. Junie spilled water. Maylee helped without panic. "Splish," she said. Junie laughed. Before dismissal, the kids shared their brave places. Junie's swing set got cheers loud enough to make Bravo's tail thump. Maylee presented last. Her treehouse now had 3 figures, herself, Bravo, and a smaller child with a crayon. "This is where we draw open doors for others." No one asked what she meant. They just nodded. Outside, a parent told Lyra, "My son hasn't smiled this much in months." "Thank Maylee," Lyra said. That night, Ms. Adler emailed. 7 new students requested to join. One girl sleeps with the lights off now. Lyra forwarded it to Dr. Wren. Ripple report. A late winter Saturday, Lyra's cruiser pulled into the newly renovated Mapleway Market. "Reimagined," the banner proclaimed. Maylee, now 8, sat buckled in back. Her denim jacket bore tiny paw patches. She clutched her laminated badge. K9, Bravo, Partner. "You sure?" Lyra asked. Maylee nodded. Yes. The word was soft, but rooted. Bravo leapt out, vest glinting. He circled once, then leaned into Maylee's side. Silent check-in. She stroked his neck. "Let's go." Inside, automatic doors whooshed, but the air now carried warmth and the scent of bread. Light poured from skylights. Shelves had been lowered, shadows eliminated. She walked, not holding Lyra's hand, grazing cart handles, noting differences. She counted the aisles. 7, 8, 9. The sign still read the same, but nothing unaware of the history. "Breakfast tomorrow?" she asked. "The best breakfast," Lyra replied. That night, the 3 of them sat on Lyra's porch swing, cocoa in hand. The cereal box rested on the rail, Bravo at their feet. "Do we have to come back again?" Maylee asked. "Only if you want," Lyra said. "Healing isn't a test. It's knowing you can choose." Maylee nodded. "Then I choose new places." Bravo woofed softly, ready for wherever. Before bed, Maylee opened her journal. She wrote, "Today I went back to aisle 9. The shelves were shorter. The shadows were gone. I brought Bravo, but I also brought myself. The brave part. Monsters leave when light walks in." She sketched herself and Bravo under skylight beams, cereal boxes glowing like stained glass. She titled it, "Homecoming." She clicked off her lamp. No closet light, just the hush of banners above her, gently rustling with pride. Somewhere in the quiet, the last chains fell away. Rain glazed Crestfield streets in neon reflections. At 2:07 a.m., Lyra parked her cruiser outside the 24-hour diner, last paperwork stop of the shift. Ordinary, uneventful, just the way she liked nights. Until she stepped back into the drizzle and spotted a damp envelope clinging to her wiper blade. Block letters, no stamp. "To the officer with the dog who listened inside," ruled notebook paper, child's handwriting. "Because of your dog, I remembered something too. I told my mom tonight. It was hard. I cried, but she believed me. Thank you." At the bottom, a drawn paw print. Her radio crackled. "Unit 12, status?" "Unit 12 clear," she replied, then added, quieter, "and grateful." Back at the precinct, she pinned the note on the Heard by Bravo board. Around it, letters, drawings, stats, testimonies. Rodriguez passed, coffee in hand. "Another?" "Left on my car," she said, touching the paw print. From the kennel, Bravo's bark echoed, like he heard everything. Dr. Wren's latest email confirmed it. Over 3,000 calls to the He Heard Me hotline. Cold cases reopened. Disclosures all starting the same. "I saw that dog. I saw that drawing." Lyra pinned the graphs next to the note. Numbers beside names. Data framed by human truths. Later that week, Rookie Officer Denby approached, holding his own note, eyes glassy. Her story made me write mine. It had been left under his mirror. Lyra led him to the corkboard. We added. One voice becomes two. Letters multiplied, mailed in, slipped under doors. Every one became the hub of a movement. Red pushpins marked every school or precinct that requested a Bravo pairing program. Tiny paw print stickers marked where teams had launched. In a barn outside Topeka, kids practiced reading aloud to retired service dogs. One girl paused, overwhelmed by memory. A dog named Sable rested his head on her sneaker. She breathed, finished, then said quietly, I think I can tell my counselor now. That story sparked a chain. Programs spread. Each received Maylee's drawing. He heard me, plans, and a poster. Bravo's attentive eyes, above two words, always listening. The posters appeared everywhere, schools, hospitals, even courtrooms. Students turned them into memes. Teachers noticed calmer rooms. Lyra and Bravo were invited to testify before lawmakers. Lyra spoke briefly. Bravo simply sat, listening. One representative whispered, sometimes the quiet says everything. The bill passed unanimously. Across the country, high school stadiums honored listening dogs. Children created comic books. A folk singer wrote a ballad, The Shepherd's Hush. Letters filled Lyra's inbox. Your program helped my foster son speak. My sister and I watch Bravo's video when we feel small. How can we train our bomb dog as a listener? She answered every one, signing off with, Heroes aren't silent, they're selectively loud. They speak by staying. One day, a family arrived at Lyra's porch. They didn't ring the bell. They left a framed drawing, a dog with galaxy eyes hugging a child. Caption, he paused so I could run. She hung it beside Maylee's original. Two voices, one choir. Greenwood Elementary hosted a regional assembly for new dog teams. Maylee, now 9, stood on stage, Bravo at her feet. A bark can scare monsters, but so can a pause. Because when someone pauses for you, the monster's lie, that no one will believe, breaks. Thunderous applause. A mural expansion was unveiled. Bravo now stood alongside Sable, Titan, and blank silhouettes, spaces for future dogs. Years passed, Bravo's muzzle silvered, but his presence only deepened. Lyra once overheard a teen explain to a new student, it's just Bravo, he's everywhere. She smiled. Legends, she realized, are stories. Says thank you for making it through. Maylee pulled out 3 painted stones, a heart, a door, a paw print. For skipping, she explained. The heart to Lyra, the door to Bravo, the paw print she kept. They stood side by side. On Maylee's count of 3, they threw. The heart skipped twice, the door 3, the paw print sailed 5, rings overlapping the sun's last shimmer. Champion, Lyra whispered. Maylee beamed. Bravo chuffed in agreement. As twilight deepened, Maylee sprinted ahead. Bravo followed, protector and playmate both. Lyra watched them, breath steady. Yeah, she said to the dusk. I think we're ready now. For what? New classrooms, new kids, new silences waiting to be heard. Maylee reached an imaginary finish line, arms high. Bravo pulled up beside her, tail wagging. Lyra arrived moments later. They stood together, woman, child, dog, under a sky blooming from copper to violet. No applause, just the quiet beat of completion. Lyra knelt, tangled her hand in Bravo's fur. End of watch? He nudged her chin. Yes, but also no. Maylie offered her hand. Bravo placed his paw in it. Lyra laid hers atop both. 3 heartbeats, 1 vow. They turned toward the parking lot. Lights flickered on. Crickets sang. Maylie skipped ahead. Bravo trotted, casting a shadow twice his size. Lyra followed, not hero now, just witness, grateful to walk behind the legends. Behind them the lake stilled, the final ripples fading. Whispers filled the trees. Always listening, when we open our lives to animals, we let a quiet kind of grace walk in on 4 paws. German shepherds like Bravo remind us that loyalty isn't loud. It stays, it listens, it leans into us when words run out. Their steadfast hearts mirror the very best in our own, proving that courage can be gentle and love can have whiskers. If tonight's story stirred something in you, perhaps give yourself a moment with a little resource I treasure. The free guide, Listening Hearts, Strengthening Your Bond with Your Dog. You can find it with a quick search online whenever you're ready. It's simply pages of thoughtful ideas for deeper, eye-level conversations with the dog, who already knows your footsteps by heart. No pressure, just a friendly suggestion from someone who's seen how life softens when we pause to hear the quiet things our companions are saying. Take a slow walk, feel the leash slacken, and let your dog lead you to the next good moment.